Thanksgiving and Black Friday are now in the books, but we do still have the rest of the Week 12 games on tap for you. Week 12 running back tier list, going through my top 36 running back rankings, recent trends, performances of the guys that already played, usage, injuries, all that good stuff will be coming at you guys today. If you haven't already heard, we have a brand new trade calculator over on Flock Fantasy. Definitely check that out down below. Link is in the description and in the pinned comment. Use promo code FSC when you sign up for 30% off. But before we get into it, let's hit the intro. All right, so we're going to kick things off with the will they play tier, talking about the biggest injuries at the running back position. A lot of the guys that were injured coming into the week have already played. So I'm just going to briefly go through this. A couple guys that were already ruled out, obviously, so you would have had to make pivots on Thursday and on Friday. I'll try and give you guys the best injury updates on the other guys here. So Devon Achane, Aaron Jones, and Kenneth Walker, all of those guys did not play in their respective games Thursday and Friday. They have been ruled out. I would expect Achane probably to be back next week. Aaron Jones and Kenneth Walker may be out another game or two here and there. So if you have Charbonnet, if you have Dillon, you might have another game or two out of those guys as starters. The most recent running back injury news was from Rachaad White of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He was actually downgraded this morning. He had full practices all week, no issues, and he was randomly added to the injury report and downgraded to questionable for Sunday's game versus the Colts due to a knee injury. So this must be a new injury. It wasn't really reported on throughout the week. So definitely not a good sign if you guys have Rachaad White. Usually on Saturday before the game, when somebody gets downgraded, it usually means that they're going to be out. So I suppose if you guys were desperate, you could go after, Chase Edmonds or Sean Tucker, Keyshawn Vaughn. The problem is I don't really think any one of these guys is going to carry the workload. So I'm not like, oh yeah, great, Rachaad White's out. He has a go-to handcuff. I think it'd probably be like a three-way timeshare and not a very good one at that. So not overly excited about his backups if he is out. Definitely monitor that. He'd be a top 15 running back should he play. Dameon Pierce, another big-time injury question mark coming into the week. Full practices all week, though. Dameon Pierce is officially listed questionable for Week 12 with the ankle injury that has kept him out the last few games, but I think he'll probably be back. It sounds like they're expecting him to play. And then the last injury that we have to talk about is D'Onta Foreman, who didn't practice on Thursday. He was a limited practice on Friday, still awaiting Saturday's injury report because he does play on Monday night. So we don't have total clarity on D'Onta Foreman, but maybe by the time you guys have heard this video, we will know for sure if he's going to play or not. A lot of doctors are calling it potentially a high ankle sprain, which means that even with 8 days rest, he probably won't be 100% by Week 12. So some people leaning towards the side of that he might be out. In that case, it'll be a Khalil Herbert, Roschon Johnson backfield. So now let's get into the actual tier list itself. Of course, the locked-in running back starts 1 to 12. All of these guys are in your lineup. A lot of them have locked in already because, Jahmyr Gibbs already played, Breece Hall already played, Raheem Mostert already played. A lot of these guys already have played their game. Christian McCaffrey already played as well. So I'll just kind of highlight the ones that haven't played yet. We have elite running backs in good matchups, Travis Etienne, Saquon Barkley, and DeAndre Swift. If you have those guys, definitely upgrade your expectations for them. Elite running backs in high-scoring games, DeAndre Swift again, Travis Etienne again, and then Jonathan Taylor as well against the Buccaneers. Elite running backs in bad matchups, so maybe downgrade expectations for DeAndre Swift, Bijan Robinson, Josh Jacobs, and then Jonathan Taylor against the Buccaneers, even though it's a high-scoring game, is not the type of defense that you want to run against. So in terms of recent usage from some of the guys in this tier, I usually like to highlight a guy or two each week. My running back 3 on the week is Travis Etienne, and Etienne has been great this year. He's been one of the best fantasy running backs in all of the NFL right now, but his workload has been downgraded in recent games. For some reason, Dearness Johnson is working in about 20-25% of the snaps, in addition to Tank Bigsby taking a little bit of the work away too. So only 23 carries for Travis Etienne over the last 2 weeks. Definitely something to monitor. The Texans are a top 12 matchup for fantasy running backs right now, so this is a get-right spot for Etienne. He's been good all year, and he's had a couple down games in a row. Maybe he's dealing with some kind of nagging injury that we don't know about, but regardless, if you haven't had your trade deadline yet, maybe send out some offers because he does have a really good workload normally. It's just for some reason he's been downgraded in recent weeks. Don't think that's a trend that will continue necessarily. I just think it's possible that, ETN in the Jaguars games the last 2 weeks, it's been one blowout for the 49ers in week 10, and then they blew out the Titans last week. So maybe the snap share is reflective of that. So running back 10 for me on the week. The other guy I wanted to highlight from this tier is Bijan Robinson, because before the bye, Bijan Robinson set a career high with 22 carries and with 24 opportunities overall. It's also worth noting that Desmond Ridder is now going to be the starting quarterback the rest of the way, and even though Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke are not good quarterbacks, Of the two, Desmond Ridder has been better for Bijan Robinson's fantasy value because he averages 1.5 targets per game more when Desmond Ridder is the quarterback. It looks like he's checking down a lot more, which is good for Bijan Robinson. The Saints are a tough matchup, but the workload should buoy him still to a top 10 play. Fantastic buy low for the fantasy playoffs because he plays the Colts, Panthers, and the Bears to close out the season, so he could be a guy that could win people some leagues if you guys have not had your trade deadline yet. So getting into the high-end RB2s tier, a lot of these guys have played already, so I'm just going to kind of highlight what they did and talk about kind of what's going forward for them. My RB13 on the week, of course, already played with Tony Pollard. I ranked him a little bit conservatively here, 21.3 PPR points. Big ups to Tony Pollard, who I have in my home league, so I was trying to be unbiased here and expect, a relatively medium game from Tony Pollard, but he did have a monster game, 100 total yards, looking a lot better over the last couple games, so that is great news if you guys have Tony Pollard. Running back 14 for me on the week is actually Derrick Henry, who is my start of the week. Usually I'm not saying Derrick Henry is a start of the week because he's usually an every week starter, but in recent games he has definitely struggled, not getting a lot of volume, definitely not being efficient with that volume, but he was playing against the Buccaneers 2 weeks ago and the Jaguars last week. Both games got out of hand where, one team was blowing out the other, and it was the Titans on the receiving end of that. Both teams are good against the run as well, which is difficult for Derrick Henry. I don't think it's a coincidence that Derrick Henry rushed for 100 yards in the only game that Will Levis looked like a great quarterback, where he had 4 touchdowns in his first start against Atlanta. So with Derrick Henry and the Titans offense, they know that they have to get him going. It could be like a squeaky wheel gets the grease type of game. Carolina ranks 30th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the running back position, and it was a get-right spot for Tony Pollard last week. I think it'll be a get-right spot for Derrick Henry this week. So definitely you want him in your lineup, even though he's been not very good over the last couple games. My running back 15 on the week is David Montgomery, 15.1 PPR points. He locked into my lineup already because he played on Thursday. Only 27% of the snaps this past week, which is pretty concerning, 40% and 38% the last 3 games total. So definitely keep an eye on that with David Montgomery. If you have not had your trade deadline, maybe sell high on him, but for the most part, I think a lot of people have, now that the week 12 games are in the books for David Montgomery, but he's been good. He's going to get goal line opportunities, but it looks like Jahmyr Gibbs has taken over this backfield from a snap share perspective. Running back 16 for me on the week is Isaiah Pacheco. Big time favorites are the Kansas City Chiefs over the Las Vegas Raiders, over a touchdown favorite this week. Top half of the NFL matchup on the ground for Isaiah Pacheco should be a get-right spot because he hasn't been very good in recent games either. 7, and 10 PPR points over the last couple games after having a really strong, end of September, early October of fantasy production. He has not been good in the month of November so far. So running back 17 for me on the week is Ramondre Stevenson. The Giants are 23rd in adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs, so it's definitely a great spot for Ramondre. One of the few teams, too, that the Patriots might actually be able to beat because the Giants are just as bad. Probably both teams will have a top 6 or 7 NFL draft pick. Also with Ramondre Stevenson, this is a guy that has 26 targets over his last 5 games, averaging over 5 targets per game in that stretch. Wicked low over-under at 33.5 points, so pretty drizzly, not a great situation, but Ramondre Stevenson's getting the workload. It's a decent matchup, and he's getting the targets, so he is my RB17 on the week. Closing out this tier, we have my running back 18 on the week, which was Zach Charbonnet, who already played on Thursday night against the San Francisco 49ers. He had 9.8 PPR points. It was an excellent workload without Walker in the lineup, 88% of the snaps, so he should be a good option going forward. I know the schedule is going to be tough for him, but he is getting the work necessary to buoy him to high-end fantasy production. Now let's get into my low-end RB2s. We have my running back 19 on the week, which is Javonte Williams. Definitely not another good game here in terms of overall game script. A 35-point over-under in this Broncos-Browns game. Top 5 defense against the run, against the pass. The Browns have pretty much been the best defense in the league this year. And the workload has actually shrunk in games where Javonte Williams has a bad matchup. We saw last week against the Vikings, didn't get a whole lot of touches in a defense against a defense that was really good against the run. So that's definitely a risk here with Javonte Williams, which is why I have him a little bit lower than his previous workload would dictate. Because, week 7, week 8, week 10, he had a good matchup and he got a lot of work. But this past week, we saw against the Vikings that if it's not a good matchup, they kind of veer away from the run. And I could see that happening again. So I ranked him a little bit lower as a result. Running back 20 for me on the week is James Conner. He's getting the workload that you want to see, but it's not resulting in a ton of fantasy production yet. The Rams are about middle of the pack against the run, against fantasy running backs. So hopefully we get a big game out of James Conner, and the Cardinals offense in general kind of disappointed us a little bit last week in terms of what Kyler Murray and the offense was able to do. So James Conner and Marquise Brown, hopefully they can get back on track in this game against the Rams. My running back 21 on the week is in that same game, just on the other side of the ball. Running back 21 for me is Kyren Williams, who is coming off of IR for the first time since week 6 with an ankle injury that he suffered then. So he was elite prior to that injury. If you guys, don't remember, Kyren Williams was getting the best workload in the NFL. Sean McVay came out and said recently that he isn't going to give him his entire full workload back, so I have him ranked a little bit conservatively here at RB21. If I knew he was going to get his full workload that we saw from weeks 1 to 6, I would probably rank him inside my top 15 running backs because the Cardinals are a great matchup, and if we hear that he's a full go and he's going to get his full workload, I would probably move him up, but I will say I'm ranking him slightly conservative here just because I think coming off of a multi-week injury, I don't really love ranking running backs aggressively, even in good matchups against the Cardinals. So my running back 22 for me on the week is James Cook. It's a pass funnel defense for the Bills offense. So last week when they played against the Jets, James Cook had a great week because typically you want to run against the Jets and not pass against them, which is why James Cook had a good game. But this week, it's the opposite. You don't want to run against the Philadelphia Eagles. You want to pass against them. So hopefully we can get some targets out of James Cook. He's kind of just along for the ride. I've been saying it really all season. He gets 15 to 18 efficient touches every single week, and you kind of just have to hope that everything breaks right, that he breaks off a long touchdown or he catches a lot of passes or whatever, because he's just not an integral part of this offense. This offense runs through Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Dalton Kincaid, Khalil Shakir, Gabe Davis. All those guys usually are higher in the pecking order than James Cook. So running back 23 for me is Jerome Ford of the Cleveland Browns. The Broncos that they're playing against are 32nd against fantasy running backs. So it's the easiest matchup in the entire slate on the entire week as well. Madison did some work last week against this Broncos defense. James Cook did some work against this Broncos defense 2 weeks ago, and Isaiah Pacheco did some work against this defense 3 weeks ago. So with Jerome Ford, he's got a decent workload. This offense is totally hamstrung by Dorian Thompson-Robinson. But I will say, usually in these game plans, they're just looking to run the ball, trying to work the clock a little bit, maybe get some long touchdowns to break their way from a guy like Jerome Ford, who we know can break off those long runs. It's a gross game total at 35 points in total, over-under between the two teams. But Jerome Ford has to be in your lineup, given the matchup and given the workload and the potential for a long touchdown that we've seen from him. So running back 24 for me on the week is Joe Mixon. He's going to parachute all the way down to RB2 range, low-end RB2, high-end RB3 range, because with no more Joe Burrow and no more light boxes for Joe Mixon, he now has to do everything on his own. And that's not a position that Joe Mixon is comfortable at this point in his career. This game is a 34.5 point over-under. He's got Jake Browning at quarterback, who might check down a decent amount, so maybe the target share will be there. But he's going to live in this area now going forward, because you basically cannot expect any sort of efficiency from Joe Mixon without Joe Burrow into the lineup. And you can't really expect him to be, every other game scoring a touchdown without Joe Burrow in the lineup now. So it's a solid run defense as well. Against the Pittsburgh Steelers, it's not a type of defense that Joe Mixon's probably going to have a lot of success with. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just don't love the whole Jake Browning experience from what I've seen so far. So my flex plays tier, the next tier that we're going to talk about, is my RB25, Jaylen Warren, who's been great, but he's splitting time with Najee Harris. He's a good flex play here against the Bengals, who've been gashed in the run game as of late. Devin Singletary 2 weeks ago really took advantage of them. Gus Edwards scored 2 touchdowns against them last week. So the type of run defense that is exploitable, especially for a guy like Jaylen Warren. So he is my RB25. My running back 26 was locked in on Thursday with A.J. Dillon, who had 17 touches, 11 PPR points. He was fine, I suppose, but he was coming into this game with an injury. So even though Aaron Jones was out, I didn't really have A.J. Dillon all the way vaulted up because he's like a handcuff to Aaron Jones. We saw that A.J. Dillon himself was kind of dealing with some stuff, so I had him at RB26 there. My running back 27 on the week is Gus Edwards. Just an absolutely ridiculous string of touchdown scoring over the last 4 or 5 games for Gus Edwards. And you guys can see just how many goal line touches this guy has had. So even though he's not like a 70% snap share workhorse, the guy's averaging 2 goal line touches a game for the Baltimore Ravens since week 6. So it's an easy matchup versus the Chargers, even though he's splitting time with Keaton Mitchell, even though he's splitting some time with Justice Hill, and of course Lamar Jackson is going to take away some work as well. He's a rock solid flex option because it seems like anytime they get inside the 10-yard line, it's Gus Edwards o'clock, and he's the guy that's going to punch in the touchdowns, and that's going to make him basically a flex play each and every week, regardless of his workload, especially against an easy defense like the Los Angeles Chargers. So running back 28 for me on the week was Brian Robinson, who played on Thursday against the Cowboys, 8.4 PPR points. It was a bad game script. It was a bad matchup. Not really shocking that Brian Robinson didn't have a good game, which is why I buried him all the way down to RB28 when his workload would probably dictate he's a low-end RB2. Number 29 for me on the week, running back 29, is Devin Singletary. He's been outstanding since Dameon Pierce has been out, but we should see a usage trend very similar to week 6 before the bye, where Devin Singletary outsnapped Dameon Pierce, but he had 14 touches to Pierce's 13. Because Pierce is active, he's probably going to play. He's been a full practice all week in Texans practices, so I think it'll probably be about an even split, and that downgrades Devin Singletary from probably like a mid RB2 if Pierce was out again to a low-end RB2, high-end RB3 type of area, which is where I kind of have him ranked right now. And the Jags defense, for what it's worth, has been really good against the run. They shut down Derrick Henry last week as a good example of that. Running back 30 for me, and then we'll get rapid fire into my deep league flex plays and close this video out. I have Alexander Mattison here, who had his best game of the year efficiency-wise against an easy Broncos defense, and he has another cupcake matchup against the Bears. He's a fine play here. Maybe I got him a little bit too low given his workload, but especially getting Justin Jefferson back, if he does play on Monday night, would be huge for this Vikings offense and for Alexander Mattison specifically. But I have a feeling, knowing that the Vikings have their bye next week, that Justin Jefferson will probably be out for this game against the Bears. They should be able to beat the Bears without Justin Jefferson, get the bye, get him 100% healthy, and they can go into the stretch run potentially trying to secure a playoff spot. So Alexander Madison's a fine play. It's a good matchup, but I'm not going overly crazy starting him over better options. So my 5 deep league flex plays, if you guys don't have any of these players and you need somebody to start in this next range, Khalil Herbert is my RB31 on the week. The Bears backfield will be muddy, and if Foreman is out, maybe you can move Khalil Herbert a little bit up, but it's possible that Foreman's going to play in this game, and if he does, it's going to be a 3-way timeshare. There's a lot of good running back options this week. There's no bye week, so it's not a big deal that you have to sit Khalil Herbert, even though he's getting a solid workload. Najee Harris, also, I have at RB32 here. He's a solid start. He's good for 15 touches a game, and probably a couple of those being targets. But again, there's no bye weeks, so there's no reason to start Najee Harris over some better options, so I have him at RB32. Chuba Hubbard, not a great situation in Carolina, at least when Chuba Hubbard was the starter, at least when Miles Sanders was the starter. We kind of knew who to start, and we don't know that right now because it's a full-blown 50-50 timeshare for one of the worst offenses in the NFL. So with Chuba Hubbard, with Miles Sanders, I wouldn't start these guys. Don't put them anywhere near your lineup. If you had to start one of them, I would start Chuba Hubbard, but it's not a great situation overall. And then Keaton Mitchell and Tajay Spears kind of close out this area of my rankings. They're both good flex options, just kind of hoping that they get a big play, they get a long touchdown, whatever the case is. Keaton Mitchell and Tajay Spears are the type of dart throws that you kind of throw into your lineup when you got nothing else to do, but there's probably 30, 40, 50 wide receivers I would start over these guys. So I would say don't be starting Keaton Mitchell or Tajay Spears if you can help it. But that is the end of the video. If you guys were helped by this video, if I helped you set your lineup and get your running back position ready, leave a like for me down below. Really appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new around here. Like I said earlier in the video, check out flockfantasy.com for all of our rest of season rankings, our dynasty rankings, our weekly rankings, our matchup charts, everything that you guys need. I wrote a couple articles on strength of schedule this past week that you can check out. We have a new exclusive video on in-season trading in dynasty leagues. All of that is available on flockfantasy.com right now, 30% off. Using the promo code FSE, you'll get access to our brand new dynasty and redraft trade calculator. Doesn't quite have rookie pick values quite set for it in dynasty leagues, but it is very valuable. Player-to-player leagues, or player-to-player trades in dynasty, player-to-player trades in redraft leagues. That will be available, and we're really excited to offer that as our newest tool over on Flock Fantasy. So if you're interested, check out the link down below in the pinned comment. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.